Hello and welcome to a Week 11 edition of the quote-unquote expert, quote-unquote square table. My name is Adam Levitan. I'm the father of the most beautiful beast in the world, Jerry. As always, I am joined by America's sharpest hippie. However, no longer hippie, full-blown capitalist. JM, what's going on?
Got my adult haircut. I got my adult website. Got my adult job. Still got some hippie elements in me, but yeah, man, we're cruising. Hey, it's crazy to hear you say week 11. Yeah. I was just telling a buddy this afternoon. I felt like 3 weeks ago was the first time I felt like a human being this season, as opposed to a machine or a robot. It's been crazy getting the site off the ground. We're already 11 weeks in. Let's make the most of this slate.
Speaking of the site and timing, next week is Thanksgiving. Why don't you tell the people the plan for 1 week season for Thanksgiving? Obviously, the 3-game slate on Thursday, to me, is one of the best slates of the season. There's so much action and everybody wants to play the Thanksgiving slates. And I think there's some interesting short slate strategy that people can take advantage of.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm actually typically not a proponent of short slates, but the 3-game slate is basically like the perfect size. One of my favorite slates. I think I've had 3 straight big Thanksgiving days. Yeah, last year was the Marvin Jones day against Xavier Rhodes. That was great. But yeah, we'll get the first 3 games up on the site on Tuesday night next week, and the rest will be coming to you on Thursday morning as usual, and we'll get you prepared for the weekend. A lot of great research for you, a lot of good thoughts on the site. Obviously, Adam and I will be with you next Friday night. I don't know where I will be recording from or what my internet will look like, but we'll make the most of that as well.
Yeah. Much rather play the 3-game slate than eat any bird carcass or anything like that. All right. Enough about next week's slate. We will get to that. This slate, week 11, one thing that stands out to me, obviously there's a lot of really strong past games missing from this slate. No Rams, no Chiefs, no Patriots, no Packers. No Bears you could consider a strong pass game now, no Vikings. And also, I think maybe hand in hand with that is there's not a lot to chew on below 5K at wide receiver. And maybe you found something different. But I think the floor ceiling combos below 5K at wide receiver are shaky, which in the past few weeks, and really for most of the season, we've been able to find some stuff that we like below 5K wide receiver. And that makes a big difference when obviously there's so many strong running backs that we want to play. So tell me what you think about this slate. It is short, and as I mentioned, there are a lot of really strong pass games not on the slate, and only a 10-game slate as a whole.
Yeah, 13 as of the time I wrote up the NFL Edge. I don't know where line movement's gone since then, but as of that point, there were 13 teams with a Vegas implied total in the range of 22.5 to 27.5. So basically, just a lot of teams in good spots, not a lot of teams in tremendous spots. We have a lot of high total games where one team, like for example, Saints and Eagles, and there's just an example, over under is 56. Eagles haven't had a single game all season go above 50, but the Saints have obviously had more than half their games go above 56. We got a lot of games like that. Titans and Colts is another one. Colts are quietly top 6 in points per game in the NFL, and Colts versus the Titans. The Titans have had all these low total games. The Colts have had all these high total games. So a really interesting setup in that probably 4 or 5 of the games are like that. Like you said, a lot of good passing offenses, a lot to like in the 5K range at wide receiver, not a lot to like below that. There are a lot of things I like about this show. Obviously, one of my favorite points in the week. But one thing I really love is, when I start my research on Tuesday, it's so crazy to get through all this week, 13 games, other weeks, 15, 16 games. I really just have to dive into the first game without like a big overview thought. And obviously your process is able to be different. And so you can kind of bring this overview picture at the start of the show, and then we can dive in to really the deeper stuff. But yeah, I mean, the way that you summed it up would be exactly the way I would sum it up after coming at it from the other angle. A lot to like. One of my favorite slates on the year so far, just because as opposed to like a week like last week where everything seemed overpriced or appropriately priced, and you had to kind of take some suboptimal plays. This week, it's more like you're choosing among good plays, which I always prefer, and I think that gives us a bigger edge because other people do still take some of these suboptimal plays, trying to find differentiation or whatever. we can take good plays and gain an edge on the field.
Let's start the quarterback position, and I want to start at the top because we have had disagreements in the past about Drew Brees' projected volume, and I'm curious to get your take here about Drew Brees' projected volume because the Eagles have faced the fewest rush attempts in the league by a wide margin. It makes sense, right? Their secondary is so bad. I feel like they've been a funnel defense forever. Now they have all these injuries. Obviously, Rodney McLeod is still out, but Jalen Mills, Ronald Darby, both out in the Eagles secondary. We've seen Drew Brees and the Saints get into shootouts before the season where his attempts have spiked to 35 plus. Obviously, the game against the Rams, the Bucs game, the Falcons game. Do you see this Eagles game as one where we could see Drew Brees' attempts spike over 35? And if that's the case, I would think if you can project that Drew Brees is a home run at 6,500.
Yeah, this is an interesting setup. There are a few positive data points for Brees, obviously, plenty of positive data points for Brees, a few negative data points as well. So I'll try to touch on a couple of those real quickly. First off, with the whole volume thing with Brees, we should recognize that like he's got an 80% completion rate, 88, 89% to Michael Thomas. Almost all of his passes are going to Kamara, a little bit to Ingram, and then Michael Thomas. So, I mean, when Thomas is catching almost 90% of his passes and the other passes are going to running backs, volume for completions isn't a huge concern. One thing to point out, Brees is near the very, very bottom of the league in average intended air yards or average depth of target. So it's not difficult for him to rack up 3 or 4 touchdowns. What's difficult is for him to get one of these 300 plus yard passing games even with 35, 36 attempts. That's not like a huge reason to dislike him. The big interesting thing for me in this game, and I love this game, and actually I'll get to Wentz after this and then get your thoughts on him because Wentz is actually my favorite play. The interesting thing in this game, Eagles and Saints are first and second in time of possession. So if you combine their time of possession, it comes up to 65 minutes, which means that we do lose some plays in this spot. Additionally, like I said, no Eagles game has even gone above 50 points, and they've played a lot of high-powered offenses. They haven't played the Saints, but they played the Falcons, they played the Bucs, they played 3 or 4 other high-powered offenses. The reason is because they have one of the best red zone defenses in football. So it's really going to come down to that. Saints have one of the best red zone offenses. If the Saints score in the red zone, Eagles have the weapons to respond. This can become a 60, 65, 70-point total game. If the Saints drive the field but get held up in the red zone, really those are drives that we don't get back. It's 5-6 minutes off the clock and 3 points. So there is a chance that this game still finishes below that 56 total and doesn't get totally crazy. I'm looking at 4 touchdowns for the Saints is my projection. I don't think they get up to that 5 or 6 mark. Won't surprise me if they do, but yeah, Brees is fine. The crazy thing here is the Eagles' run defense has actually been pretty bad this year, 4.7 yards per carry allowed. So it wouldn't be wild to see the Saints attack more heavily on the ground. Eagles are horrible against pass-catching running backs. So again, great for Kamara, decent for Ingram, but the upside as far as these 30, 40-yard plays is just tougher for like a quick strike offense. Wentz, on the other hand, the Eagles can't run the ball. The Saints are tremendous against the run. Wentz threw for 340 yards last week against a Cowboys team that most people don't even attack through the air. 2 touchdowns or more in I think 6 straight games. Rushing upside. So yeah, I mean, it's going to be really difficult for either quarterback to fail, but I think it's going to be hard for Wentz to fall shy of like 25, 26 points. And I think he could genuinely get you 30 plus. And there's a lot of cheap quarterbacks to like this week, but for 1K more, like Wentz and Cam are the guys I see who could get us 30 plus. So I might find a way to just pay up. You have any thoughts on Wentz there? Thoughts on Cam up at the top?
Oh, I mean, on paper, Wentz is an awesome play for sure. Wentz is by almost every metric is playing better than last year when I thought he was a serious MVP candidate, So you certainly can't take anything away from him there. I think the only case you can make is, hey, the Eagles have struggled so badly this year going on the road to New Orleans. And they just get stomped out. But that would be somewhat surprising to me. I think Wentz is an awesome play. I slightly prefer Cam, who gives you way more rushing floor and ceiling. And also, to me, like the Lions are just like, I mean, outside of Darius Slay, the talent level in their secondary is so bad. At least the Saints have Marshawn Lattimore and Eli Apple, who are talented dudes. So yeah, I think that Cam would be my preferable play over Wentz, but I certainly like them both. And yeah, I mean, those are for sure awesome plays, and right there with Breeze also. You prefer Wentz to Cam?
It's really close for me. So originally, Cam was the only tier one quarterback I had, and then when I reread through the Eagles Saints write up, I don't like having just one. Which, by the way, I brought this up on the chat pod last week. It was quietly a hot take a couple of weeks ago when you said that you feel it's bad for the industry to say I'm definitely playing this guy. I say it's quietly a hot take because a lot of people do that. I even do that sometimes, and I think that was a sharp call, realistically, to just not say I'm definitely playing this guy, because we're trying to teach people how to think for themselves, how to process research on their own, how to become good DFS players. So thought that's a thought worth highlighting from the GOAT.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, when I do the cash game considerations, like I like even if I'm set on one guy, I still put like 5 guys in there because like I don't want to give people like a lineup or who I'm playing. That's like the last possible thing I want to do.
Yeah, so I don't like having one tier one quarterback. Originally it was Cam, so I may end up there. I may end up saving money as well. But when I read through things, it was like if there's another tier one guy, it's Wentz. And as I messed around with things, he's really started to stand out to me. So I like both guys pretty equally right now, slightly toward Cam, but I mean it's close on those two. And the crazy thing is there's still a lot to like behind those two at quarterback as well. I mean, there's a lot of quarterbacks that you probably can't go wrong taking this year. You talked about Wentz playing better than last year. How about Matt Ryan, who is legitimately playing as well as or better than he played in his MVP season? The thing about this Cowboys team, people don't really attack them on the ground. One of the lowest opponent pass play rates. But last week, the Eagles were like, screw it, we're going to throw 75% of the time. And we saw what Carson Wentz did back at home for Matt Ryan. I like him as well. I think Cam and Wentz, you could actually play without stacking them with anyone just because they spread the ball around so much. Matt Ryan, I would definitely want to stack him with Julio, but I think he's up there with these guys. It won't surprise me if Deshaun Watson matches these guys or even potentially outscores these guys. Obviously, his chest injury, the punctured lung, all that's doing better. So likelier that the Texans go pass heavy, likelier that he runs some. And you can even throw Andrew Luck's up there in price range, Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Mm-hmm.
All of these guys are solid plays. All of these guys should get you 20 plus with a shot at 25 plus.
Yeah, all these guys are on my list. My first instinct was Ryan Fitzpatrick would only be tournament viable because I'm afraid he's going to get benched. But I think that's pretty low likely, particularly when you consider Jameis Winston's contract situation and injury risk and everything. So yeah, I mean, Ryan Fitzpatrick went over 400 yards for the 4th time already this season last week, was like the worst quarterback in the history of the NFL in the red zone last week. But against the Giants, he should be totally fine. I like him. I think Andrew Luck is fine. I think Deshaun Watson has just this massive ceiling because of the way he runs with the football. It concerns me to use guys in Washington just because they can kind of dictate the flow of a game with their defense and their run game at times. But if you think that the Redskins won't be able to do so, Deshaun Watson is an awesome play for sure. So I like all those guys. Matt Ryan, for sure. I think Matt Ryan is an awesome play like almost every week. I mean, particularly at home against this bad Cowboys team. I want to get your take, though, on this Ravens situation because like my first instinct was Lamar Jackson is so likely to run for 50 plus yards, like that at 4,700, it's really hard for him to fail. But then I started thinking about it. And in the preseason, I mean, this dude like couldn't complete a 10-yard pass. Like I didn't think he was like, I know everybody talked about how bad he was throwing in the preseason. He was worse than I could have even imagined. Now that was 3 months ago. Has he gotten better? Probably. Can he throw for 150 yards or 200 yards against his Bengals defense, which is on pace to be like the worst in the history of the NFL? Probably. But it's just, I think it's a little bit risky to play Lamar Jackson. But man, like him getting the 100-yard rushing bonus is for sure not out of the question. Like this dude is unreal running the football.
Yeah, I wrote in my article this week, the one function of fantasy is a lot of people stop thinking about how football is actually played, and they just worry about measurables and talent. and it's exciting when somebody like Lamar Jackson is starting. His rushing upside is exciting. One thing that stood out to me this week was Brian Schottenheimer talking about Rashad Penny. And, they're saying, like, is he going to be the starting running back moving forward after he had this great game? And Brian Schottenheimer was saying, essentially, like, it's a really long season and some rookies just can't handle it. And he said there's still times in the classroom midweek where he'll have to basically say, Rashad, are you here? Are you with us? And I think that that's like an element that we can't see on the field, but this mental side of things that, look, there's a reason why Flacco, the Ravens are the second pass heaviest team in football. And Flacco has 2 300-yard games. I mean, that's embarrassing. And yet Lamar Jackson hasn't seen the field. That can be taking things too far. There's an assumption of rational coaching, as you bring up. I remember last year when Nathan Peterman started for the Bills and everyone was like, oh, start the Chargers defense. I was like, hold on now. The Bills are literally if the season ended right now, they're in the playoffs, and this team sees Nathan Peterman in practice every day, and they feel he gives them a better chance to win than Tyrod Taylor. He goes out and throws 5 picks in the first half. So who knows what these coaches are thinking, but there's got to be a reason Lamar Jackson hasn't sniffed the field.
Yeah.
I would be concerned. I think the deep tournament stuff, it's fine. But like at 4,700, you still got Dak at 5,200. Yeah. You got Eli at 5,200. I think those guys are both viable, in that same conversation. And each guy could get you 25 to 30 points.
Yeah. Let's talk about Dak for a second because he's only 500 more than Lamar Jackson, as you mentioned. It's hard for me, like when we talk about hashtag defense doesn't matter, like the Eli Manning thing, it'd be hard for me to click Eli Manning given the way he's playing. And we can talk more about the Giants when we get to Barkley and Odell, but like for them to be projected implied for 27 points when they went like 30 games without scoring 30, all because they're facing Tampa, scares me a bit on Eli. But anyways, on Dak, I think Amari Cooper has made a big difference for this offense as a whole, just his presence. I still think that the coaching and the way they want to play would scare me off of Dak a little bit, and I would try to get up to Deshaun Watson or Ryan Fitzpatrick or Andrew Luck or something like that if I was going to go in the 5K range. But what do you think about Dak versus Eli in that tier?
Yeah, it is funny with how condensed pricing is, and you've been really sharp on pointing that out this year. That like in a vacuum, I actually like Dak quite a bit. I actually like Eli quite a bit. But then you're like literally 500 more to get to Deshaun Watson, 1,100 more to get to Carson Wentz. What is it, 900 to get to Cam? At other positions, there's no way you would consider like not finding the way to get that salary. So that's tough for me. But, on DraftKings, every dollar usually counts. So I think there's a case to be made. I agree with you. I think that Amari has opened up things in this offense. We'll get to Amari here in a little bit. Just the fact that they are going to force him targets forces the defense to account for that. On Eli, so like we don't want to overstate red zone stuff, but I would actually take Eli over Ryan Fitzpatrick. Giants are third in the NFL in red zone defense. The big issue for Eli, like we talk about poorly he's played, but highest completion rate of his career. Well, why? Because they're throwing all these short passes, but that's all you do against Tampa, throw short passes and complete them. They allow the highest completion rate, and then they're 32nd in red zone defense. So like if you look at Eli's completion rate and his yardage, he's actually been producing. The only thing he hasn't produced is touchdowns. With the weapons they have, like it's not crazy to think he could put in 3 touchdowns against the worst red zone defense in football. So I think that this is probably crazy to say, but I think he's a lock for 300 passing yards. They're the pass heaviest team in the NFL. I mean, they're going to throw the ball. He's got these weapons. It's a great matchup. So if he gets the touchdowns, I think I like him a little bit more than Dak. But yeah, I'm with you. I think on main builds, you get up to Deshaun Watson, you get up to Cam, you get up to Wentz, and then you mess around with these guys in tournaments, recognizing they could get you 25 to 30 this week.
Anything else at the quarterback position?
No, I mean, it's a pretty long list for both of us, it seems, this week. And I don't think you can go wrong with most of these guys. So try to not overthink it too much. But yeah, I won't go beyond these guys because they're all really good plays.
All right, let's move to the running back. know about this because there's obviously a lot of good plays, but I think that the most owned running back this week will be David Johnson, considering he is, 1,300 cheaper than he opened the season. He's home against the Raiders, has played so well the last 2 weeks under Byron Leftwich. That was against the 49ers and Chiefs. You can say those were great matchups. Well, now he gets home against the Raiders, who are allowing the most yards per play in the entire NFL, are pretty much laying down. Didn't even practice twice this week because of the air quality in Oakland. David Johnson, I think, will be above 30% owned. How do you feel about David Johnson chalk at 7,500?
I don't know, man. If we here's the thing: I have him below Saquon and Zeke, and Saquon and Zeke aren't that much more expensive. But I do really like David Johnson. His 9 targets last week. Let's throw that out because they were chasing the Chiefs the whole game. They'll likely be in a close game or playing with a small lead in this one. One of those targets came at wide receiver last week. Rosen threw 39 and 40 passes the last 2 weeks. So Raiders, as bad as they are, and we talked about this throughout the season, it's always like, man, this is a great matchup against the Raiders. And then they limit opponent plays so much that you end up with disappointing box scores. So, tremendous matchup for DJ. I think I'll give him 4 or 5 targets, and I'll give him 20 carries. They still rank 32nd in yards per carry in the NFL, 32nd in DVOA, running the ball. So, I don't know. Is it crazy to say that Zeke and Saquon are clearly better plays?
No, and I think Zeke and Saquon will be almost as owned as DJ. I think people are going to take the savings on DJ, and that's the only reason he'll be more owned, because you do save 1,000. But yeah, let's talk about Zeke and Saquon. I have a strong preference to Saquon over Zeke. I think that the overall floor of the Cowboys offense, this is still a bad team with one of the worst coaches in the NFL going on the road to me. And we saw when they went to Washington, everybody played Zeke. It turned into a disaster for everybody who played Zeke. Obviously, going to Atlanta is different than going to Washington. Atlanta, 31st in league in yards per play allowed. But yeah, I think Saquon, to me, in this matchup with his pass game role, is a clear cut above Zeke. You seem to think that they're closer.
Yeah, I think they're really close. By the way, Jason Garrett, I feel for the guy. I was watching one of the games a week or two ago. You can't watch those games for too long, but tuned in for a couple of minutes. And Jason Garrett, under his eyes, it looks like me during the first half of the season. It's just like dark blue circles under his eyes when everyone was tweeting and saying JM needs to take care of himself and get some sleep. Jason Garrett just banging his head against the wall trying to figure out what he's doing wrong.
It's not that hard, dude. Your job is harder than his. It's not that hard, man. He's so uncreative.
So yeah, against Atlanta, and we're saying we like Matt Ryan. So here's the thing, man. The Cowboys are going to run the ball. They get down by 10 points, they're still going to run the ball. I'm still looking at 5 catches for Zeke. Here's the thing with Zeke. I think it's hard for him to fall shy of 17 points without a touchdown, without any explosive plays. And he has multiple games this year of 150 rushing yards. I think he only has 1 game with multiple touchdowns. So he's put up some huge scores. He's topped 35 DraftKings points more than once. I think his floor is lower than Saquon, but I actually think his ceiling is the same or maybe a little bit higher, because Saquon's going to see more targets, fewer carries, but Saquon's targets, they're not that much better than Zeke's targets. And Zeke is the guy with, the higher touchdown projection, higher likelihood of 130, 140, 150 yard rushing game. To be clear, I've been going back and forth between these two all week, so I don't have a clear preference, but that's the case to be made for Zeke. I think it's really close between these two. But like you said, there's a case to be made for Saquon as the better play as well.
Yeah. Let's stay up in this high price range. We've mentioned DJ, we've mentioned Zeke, we've mentioned Barkley. We haven't mentioned Melvin Gordon, who to me has an awesome matchup at home against the Broncos team, which can rush the passer, but I think struggles pretty badly to defend the run as a whole. Melvin Gordon continues to be a machine in terms of touchdowns, and yeah, he's not getting 20 plus carries. The Chargers aren't running that many plays, but Melvin Gordon has a huge pass game role, which I think we've underestimated in the past. Melvin Gordon is 8,900. He's more than Barkley. He's more than Zeke. He's 1,400 more than DJ. For that reason, I think he'll go a little bit overlooked, but Melvin Gordon is still going to be owned What do you think about him in relation to these other guys?
Yeah, so I think that this is where you just say, what's my style of play? So for me, my style of play is to care a ton about volume, just because volume does raise floor. And when I'm building a roster, unless it's like just a large field roster, I want, if a guy fails, I still want him to have a really high floor so that he doesn't wreck my team. Not that Melvin Gordon has a low floor, but I think a bad game from Gordon is probably 14 points. A bad game from Zeke and Saquon is like 17, 18, just by virtue of them seeing so many more touches. So yeah, I mean, I'm taking Zeke and Saquon over Melvin Gordon, but there's not, I mean, you could clearly make a case for Gordon as the better play there. I think with how bad Atlanta's been in the red zone, how bad they've been against the run, how bad they've been against pass catching running backs, there's just a lot to like about Zeke's touchdown upside. And so if we're going to, this whole touchdown thing's harder to bet on because there's more variance, but that's what you're betting on with Gordon, and it's a good spot for Zeke to score touchdowns. So, yeah, I mean, I'd go these guys. Same thing with Saquon. Tampa's, bottom red zone defense. I think Atlanta's 30th, Tampa's 32nd. So I would take these guys over Melvin Gordon, but totally fine with these plays.
One other guy at the high price range we didn't even mention, who to me continues just every week to be an awesome play, is Christian McCaffrey. I mean, I've wanted to play Christian McCaffrey every week. I haven't been able to play him every week, but when you have this guy who's going to catch 80, 90 balls, and also is on the field 95% of the snaps, and also has a red zone role, also has a goal line role now, like, I mean, CMC is an awesome play no matter what the matchup is. He gets the Lions here. What do you think about CMC?
Yeah, I have him marked down as a tier 2 play, which for me is guys who I just feel really safe about their floor, but less certain about their upside. So I don't think you can go wrong with him. I have him below these other three, but yeah, I mean, like if you roster him, you're locking in 18 to 20 points with upside for more. I will note that the Lions run defense has been much better with Snacks Harrison. Take away the 70-yard run that Dalvin Cook had, and they've allowed under 4 yards a carry, but they've played 2 bad run offenses, and they still gave up that 70-yard run. They still have issues on the second and third levels. So a lot to like with Christian McCaffrey. Totally fine with the play, but I like him less than the other two.
One of the big questions on the slate, I think, is what do you think of this Jacksonville defense? Like, how bad is this Jacksonville defense? Now, I actually tend to think that they're just not generating turnovers, and that makes them look way worse than they actually are. But DraftKings algorithm, or whoever does the pricing there, has discounted a lot of the Steelers, including James Conner, who just has this ridiculous role in such a, like this spot is just like the Steelers running back spot is such a productive spot. I mean, James Conner, 7,200 to me sticks out like a sore thumb. I'm not sure I'll pull the trigger because I still have respect for this Jacksonville defense. Do you still have respect for the Jacksonville defense?
I do, man. They're allowing 3.61 yards per carry. If you take away just that one run that Saquon had, which was a run that only Saquon can have in week 1. Like you said, they're not generating turnovers. They're not getting sacks. Bortles is turning over the ball constantly. So it's made this defense look a lot worse than it is. They've allowed the fewest wide receiver catches, the fewest wide receiver touchdowns, 3.6 yards per carry to running backs. But I will bring up something that you said, 2016, there was a week where you really liked Le'Veon Bell against the Ravens, and he was like 8,600 or 8,300. And I was surprised by that. And you basically just said, look, this many touches, I'm still going to have interest in the guy. And I brought that up on the chat pod 2 weeks ago when Connor was playing the Ravens, and just saying, like, look, in tournaments, this is still a guy you can go to because of this role. And that was a week he put up, 32 points on DraftKings against Baltimore. So, yeah, the role keeps him in play. I do want to point out, this stood out to me this week. His matchups this year: Cleveland, one of the worst run defenses; Kansas City, one of the worst run defenses; Tampa, one of the worst defenses; Atlanta, one of the worst run defenses; Cincinnati, one of the worst run defenses; Cleveland again, Carolina, and then 2 games against Baltimore. Like, literally, he's had the softest schedule. And I don't want to downplay this role or how good Connor's been, but there's still some question marks in a tough matchup. So if he gets 25 plus touches, I would love it. If he gets 20, I think that he falls short of what we would need.
A lot of people got burned by Dion Lewis last week. I still thought he was for sure the right play. I mean, you don't get 22 touches or whatever he had on DraftKings for 4,800 or 4,500 or whatever he was very often. But I do think that people will go back to Dion Lewis, and I think it's obviously a good spot to go back to Dion Lewis. I'm surprised that DraftKings did not raise his price more, considering his ownership and considering how many touches that he got. Dion Lewis is going to be owned again. Do you have interest in going back to him?
Yeah, absolutely. The Colts don't allow a ton of running back touchdowns, and maybe that's fluky. I don't know. And obviously, Derrick Henry, 4 touchdowns across the last 3 weeks. So he's a threat to take those away. So what if you end up with 3 catches for 20 yards and 70 rushing yards? Like that's not going to kill you at that price, but there's no guarantee that Dion Lewis's 22 touches is the same as 22 touches from these other guys. But he has an extremely talented back on a good offense, or what appears to be a good offense right now, in a good matchup, one of the best matchups for pass catching running backs. So I'm very comfortable with Dion Lewis this week. I think there's probably a better than 50% chance he ends up on my main build. It just doesn't feel great when you just go basically 100% on a guy and then he gets you 8.8 points, on 22 touches. So, but yeah, I mean, the spot's great. Again, game flow last week was interesting because the Titans were ahead the whole game. So we didn't get this pass game work that we were really banking on. But yeah, I mean, I think he's not quite as sharp of a play as he was last week. This game sets up a little differently, but still one of the sharpest plays. Like you said, I mean, surprising his price wasn't bumped up. But yeah, I like him quite a bit down there.
Speaking of price not getting bumped up, Mark Ingram went ham last week on the Bengals. I think this is a different spot, but Mark Ingram is certainly locked into 12 to 14 carries and 2 to 3 targets at a minimum. Mark Ingram's price also didn't go up despite his huge game, 4,700 still. And then also down in this 4K range, we have Theo Riddick. I mean, with Marvin Jones out, with Golden Tate gone, with Michael Roberts out, with Detroit's offensive line playing so poorly, it would make sense for a ton of dump offs to Theo Riddick. What do you think about Ingram and Riddick as pivots off of Dion Lewis? And maybe you can throw Alex Collins in there too if you like him. I don't think I've ever played Alex Collins, but I figured I'd say his name anyways.
I think I played Alex Collins a couple of times down the stretch last year.
Yeah, he was good. I mean, I just never played him.
Yeah, I'll get him out of the way first. I just think there's a lot of question marks on this offense, and he doesn't have a huge pass game role. I mean, he's not as good of a play on paper as these other guys, but it won't be surprising if he pops out for a big game. I think that, or a solid game, I should say. I think that Riddick is an extremely safe floor play. It's going to be tough for him to not get 6 for 50 in this spot, 6 catches for 50 yards. No carries across the last 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. He's played, I think it was 43 snaps at wide receiver and 42 at running back. So he's locked into this slot role. You kind of hate to use a running back spot at what's essentially a wide receiver, but yeah, I mean, let's say Riddick gets a touchdown, he's pushing for 20 points. If he doesn't, he's certainly not going to hurt your roster. I think he's probably the strongest salary saver this week, like sub 4,500 guy. On Ingram, man, last week was disappointing because I basically locked in Ingram and Kenny Golladay on 100% of my high dollar rosters and just really bet heavily on them. Felt like I had things figured out there. And then everybody else came by and got Corey Davis and Aaron Jones at super high ownership, in the same price range. But I think last week was sort of the Ingram week. I'm certainly playing around with him. Not as good of a spot as last week where this Bengals team just gives up so many touchdowns to running backs. But, the role, I mean, you can break down the role between Kamara and Ingram last year and this year. It is almost identical. Basically, Ingram getting 45% of the snaps instead of like 52%. He has 63 carries. Kamara has 67. He has 13 targets. Kamara has 24. So Ingram's getting work. But yeah, like you said, I think 12 to 14 carries, 2, 3, 4 targets. So, without a multi-touchdown upside spot here, I like him less, but I think he's fine.
You mentioned Alvin Kamara. We didn't talk about him when we talked about the expensive guys. I mean, certainly Saints, I think, given who's on this slate, the Saints are by far the team most likeliest, like head and shoulders above the other teams in terms of how many touchdowns they'll score, how many points they'll score. Kamara has seemingly established himself as their go-to guy around the goal line. I don't know if that's random or if that's something they're doing on purpose, but either way, I mean, Kamara is going to catch 4, 5, 6 balls for sure. He has a red zone role, and his efficiency is out of control. How do you feel about Kamara?
Yeah, touch counts since Ingram came back of 19, 20, 23, and 16. You mentioned, 4+ catches. The only game where he fell shy of that was against Washington, where they just blew them out of the building. He had only 2 catches in that game, outlier there. Yeah, I mean, I think if we're getting to this, like, behind Zeke and Saquon conversation, I don't see what separates Melvin Gordon from Kamara necessarily, because you're still looking at around 18 to 22 touches for each guy. I guess like 1 or 2 more touches for Gordon, but it's close between the two. I think he's very much in the conversation as well. I do think that Zeke and Saquon are better on paper plays, but definitely part of the conversation.
Anything off the board at the running back position?
Your boy, Kerryon Johnson at 5,800. Mm-hmm. Where's that?
Yeah. I love Kerryon Johnson, man. I'm worried about this offense as a whole, but yeah, they now that they're using Theo Riddick and Kerryon Johnson simultaneously, and they've kind of phased their Garrett Blount out, Kerryon's a beast, man.
Yeah, I think Kerryon's one of my favorite plays on the slate. With Blount being phased out and with Riddick lining up in the slot so often, that will probably increase with Marvin Jones out. Kerryon's basically locked into 70% snap rate. He's locked into these 4 to 6 targets. If you believe in him as one of the top players, obviously the offense is bad, but I think he gets 20+ touches, and I think that 3, 4, 5 of those are catches. I mean, I like the spot quite a bit for Kerryon. I think he's significantly underpriced. Panthers, another team, I think they're 31st in red zone defense, one of the worst red zone defenses. So again, you just I love taking running backs against teams that can't stop teams from scoring in the red zone, because it just creates so many opportunities for running backs to pile up touchdowns. Yeah, I like Kerryon. I think he's super underpriced. I think he's very much in play.
Yeah, I guess the reason I glossed over Kerryon on first glance, because I was like, well, if they get behind, it's just going to be Theo Riddick the whole time. But if Theo Riddick is playing slot receiver, then Kerryon's on the field also, and that would give him a chance to be game flow independent as well. Anything else at running back?
No, I think you can take a shot on Leonard Fournette and his workload. Not a great matchup, but 29 touches on 39 snaps. I mean, they're clearly going to try to get him the ball. So 25+ touches. Dude was number 4 overall pick in the draft last year. He's a good player. He's in the conversation as well.
Let's move to wide receiver. I mean, all I do is I play Michael Thomas and I play Todd Gurley every week, and it's a print fest. Todd Gurley is not on this slate. Michael Thomas is. I think this is an awesome spot for Michael Thomas. We know that he's not going to necessarily get deep ball chances. He won't get deep ball chances, but second in the league in targets inside the 10-yard line, 89% catch rate. I do expect Drew Brees' attempts to spike here. Julio Jones is an awesome play. Odell Beckham is an awesome play. I think Michael Thomas is an awesome play. Do you have a preference of these 3?
Yeah, Odell Beckham. And I won't say by far, but I will say clearly 100+ yards in every game this year when he's had 8 catches. His lowest target game was 9 targets. He's been at double digits in every other game. Eli's completing 75%, 70% of his passes, and the Bucs allow the highest catch rate. So the chances of Beckham not getting to 8 catches and 100 yards, I think, are pretty slim. And then that's 21 DraftKings points right there, plus whatever upside he has for I'll say this, he's likelier than Thomas to have like a 150-yard receiving game. And I think that's fair. Obviously, Thomas's red zone role is tremendous. The injuries in the Eagles secondary are basically making them an expansion level secondary right now. So yeah, I mean, I don't have like a strong argument against Thomas, but for me, it goes Beckham first, and I might be prioritizing Beckham over Zeke and Saquon even. I mean, there's a lot of guys I like up here. I like Julio a lot. I like DeAndre Hopkins a lot. I like Saquon and Zeke a lot, and you can probably only use 2 of them with an optimized roster. So, but yeah, I mean, I might end up with Beckham and just say, look, I'll take one high-priced running back. Thomas is in the conversation, but I would take Beckham first, and I'd probably take Julio over Thomas as well.
Let's keep moving down a little bit. You mentioned DeAndre Hopkins. Josh Norman's been balling, man. Josh Norman's has had 3 straight shadow coverage assignments against really good wide receivers and held up well. DeAndre Hopkins has been mostly matchup proof. I mean, dude makes the most outrageous catches that I've seen. DeAndre Hopkins is 7,900. You get a nice discount off of the Odell, Julio, Michael Thomas tier. Talk to me about Nuke.
Yeah, you're not seriously talking about matchup with DeAndre Hopkins,
no,
are you?
I'm not.
Yeah, I mean, basically it's just the discount and the targets. The Texans, the one thing that really scares me, obviously, you brought up earlier the ball control style of Washington. That's a factor too. The thing that really scares me is Houston has been one of the run heaviest teams in the NFL across their winning streak, really. I think across their last 5 games. So is that because of all the injuries that Deshaun Watson was dealing with? Or is that because this is how the Texans want to win games? They have been winning games this way. It's hard for me to believe that they traded for Demaryius Thomas. They have DeAndre Hopkins, drafted Kiki Kute. He'll be out this week probably. But Deshaun Watson, it's hard for me to believe that they want to try to win games with Lamar Miller. Teams don't try to run against Washington. So I think if Watson does throw it 35 times, he just locks onto Hopkins. So you're probably looking at 14, 15 targets. And he's been getting it done on 7, 8, 9 targets recently. And I think that obviously if he spikes up to 12 to 14, he becomes one of the top plays. I think that's the big thing is I see Michael Thomas at 9 or 10 targets. So if we have a shot at getting DeAndre Hopkins up to 12 to 14, I like him more. But yeah, I mean, it's close on all these guys. All of these guys are really good plays this week, which is what I love about this week is we're choosing among good plays instead of trying to make bad plays look good to us.
One play that stood out to me in the 6K range was T.Y. Hilton. I know it's been a major struggle for him since he came back from the hamstring pull, but he saw Tre'Davious White in one of the games. He saw Jalen Ramsey in another one of the games. In the Oakland game, Andrew Luck only had like 30 passes. They ran the ball like 36 times or something like that. In this spot where hopefully we can get him on Malcolm Butler, and we'll see what they do defensively with Adoree Jackson. But hopefully we get T.Y. Hilton on Malcolm Butler at home where his splits are so good. I mean, do expect Andrew Luck's attempts to get back up here, and T.Y. Hilton's down at 6,100. He stood out to me as something really strong. What did you see on T.Y.?
Yeah, I've been doing something lately. I talked to you before the show about I've been trying to learn some more multi-entry stuff and messing around with some things and building a better process for building my rosters because I'm so busy running the site that I can't just build rosters the way I could in the past. And so one thing I'm doing right now is kind of forcing myself on Thursday night to build at least one stack from each game just to expose myself to different ideas, different plays. And I got to this game and I had T.Y. Hilton on my stack and I was like, oh God, that would be so ugly to do. And then you're like, you know, it's because I rostered him against Oakland when he got 4 points in the same price range. But yeah, I mean, it's not going to surprise us if he goes for 25 to 30 points. This is a crazy stat. The Titans have given up 11 touchdowns to wide receivers, and Malcolm Butler has given up 7 of them. So smash spot if they can get him on Malcolm Butler. I don't think it's a lock. You know, there's a lot of different ways that this team can attack. They're not throwing downfield a ton. T.Y. Hilton, he had those 2 red zone touchdowns against Buffalo, but he's not like a big red zone threat, especially this team with all these tight ends. So there are plenty of paths to him failing. I wouldn't use him on a main build or cash game, small field stuff, but I think a large field stuff, yeah, I mean, enormous upside, but he's like a 10 to 30 point range instead of like a 15 to 30 point for me.
All right. I think one of the biggest questions on the slate is what to do with the 5K wide receiver range. Amari Cooper is clearly one of the focal points of Dallas's offense now certainly has a good matchup against the Falcons. Corey Davis continues to see 30% of Marcus Mariota's targets. Price did go up to 5,600. You can make a case Corey Davis remains significantly underpriced. And then Kenny Golladay at 5,800 with Marvin Jones out. You would think that the target floor has been steadied for Kenny Golladay. His targets have been all over the place. So help the people, Jam. I really think that's one of the biggest questions of the week, the 5K wide receiver range.
I don't know that I actually feel this way, but this phrase kept popping into my head this week. And you used it last week about Julio. And that was, imagine not playing Amari Cooper at 5,400 when he's seeing 8 to 10 targets. He's playing Atlanta, who's going to score points. They're going to be chasing. They're just focused on throwing the ball to this guy. I mean, I can't see Amari having a bad game. I know it's Amari Cooper, but what does Pete think? Like, that's our go-to here, right?
He's petrified. I mean, we've seen Amari Cooper in the 5K range before. I understand that was with Oakland. But like I said before, I think Dallas's offense has a way lower floor than most other people do because Jason Garrett's at the controls. But yeah, I mean, it certainly sticks out. I mean, I hear you, man. He's a talented guy and he's 5,400 and he's getting a lot of targets. I mean, that's basically the argument.
Yeah, I think on paper, well, not a thing. On paper, he's definitely behind Golladay for me. And on paper, I think he might be behind Corey Davis, but it's really close. And I just like knowing that no matter what, they're forcing him targets. You could make the same case for Corey Davis. My concern on Corey Davis would be, and this is really the only concern, last week was a man coverage defense. Patriots are one of the man heaviest teams in football, which opens up a lot more opportunities for these downfield routes where Davis can catch the ball on the move. 2 weeks ago, he saw 10 targets, or I guess it was 3 weeks ago, he saw 10 targets against Dallas and went 7 for 56. Dallas runs this zone heavy coverage scheme that's very similar to what the Colts run. So the Colts have allowed the second highest completion rate in the entire NFL behind only Tampa. But they allow the second lowest ADOT. So it's a lot of short passes, and then they try to tackle after the catch. So like I see an opportunity for a lot more of these sit in the zone 7-8 yards downfield, catch the ball and get tackled, as opposed to these. I mean, last week I think Corey Davis had like 7 targets, 15 or more yards downfield. That's why he got 125 yards. It's harder for me to see that this week. So I think that it's going to be difficult for any of these guys to fail. But I think that we could see it's likelier that Corey Davis ends up at like 50 or 60 receiving yards than it is for Amari or Golladay. And I think Golladay is just and I want to hear your take on that. Like, try to talk us on to Davis over those guys. But Golladay, last one is, I mean, I liked him last week with Marvin Jones out there. I think that his role is pretty secure in this offense right now. And getting the target, I think that Carolina will be able to scheme some things, but they, like, literally last week, they were just like, cool, let's just throw to Golladay once Marvin Jones went down. So like another 13 targets wouldn't be crazy. Maybe only catches 6 or 7 of them, but a lot to like there. What do you think about these 3 guys?
Yeah, it's tough. My first instinct was Golladay for sure. I think you can make a case that Marvin, unlike the Tyler Boyd situation where I thought AJ Green going out was actually really bad for Tyler Boyd, I think Marvin Jones going out is good for Kenny Golladay because his targets have been so all over the place. It's not like Tyler Boyd, who's always been seeing targets. Kenny Galladay's targets have been all over the map. So my first thing was Golladay. Corey Davis has mostly in his career only played well against New England. And I don't know if that's like a coincidence, right? But it scares me a little bit that he's underperformed so many times. And I think maybe one thing that we've overlooked that we can't really know is how bad Marcus Mariota's injury was to start the year with his elbow or whatever. And now that he's healthy, Corey Davis is rising with him. I think you can make a pretty good case for that. But yeah, I mean, for me right now, it would probably go Golladay, Amari, and then Corey Davis. But yeah, I mean, getting to this range, I think is kind of the key, getting to 2 guys if you want to play 2 guys in this range or however you want to do it. Finding a way to 2 of these guys, I think would make sense in a lot of optimal builds, but we'll see. All right, let's go below 5K where it is dangerous down here, man. I didn't see a lot below 5K. Now, if you want to totally punt, TJ Jones will be playing every snap opposite Kenny Golladay. TJ Jones has been in the league for 4 years, done nothing. And you can make a case that, yeah, the Lions have had a really deep wideout core this whole time, yada, yada, yada. I'm not sure how much work TJ Jones is going to get. The other pure punt you can make is stone minimum Seth Roberts. Jordy Nelson is out. Martavis Bryant is out. Seth Roberts is going to play every snap. Obviously, it's not a good matchup against Patrick Peterson and those guys. However, stone minimum, we don't often see guys who are going to play every snap at stone min 3K. So do you see any merit at all to totally punting off with TJ Jones or Seth Roberts?
I don't want to just give a strict no. I don't see any merit. I think in large field stuff, you make a case for trying to find somebody who could get you some upside. I don't know that it's necessarily TJ Jones or Seth Roberts or Brandon LaFell's another one, 3,400 that you can probably get 8 to 10 points, 6 to 10 points, I should say. And if you get anything above that, you feel like you got lucky. But yeah, I mean, what you said is really what stands out to me, and the way I feel is in an optimal build, you're trying to get to at least 2 of these wide receivers. I had a buddy send me a team a couple of days ago where he paid up at a couple spots and he had like 2 4K wide receivers, and he was like, "What do you think about this?" And it was just like, man, unless it's large field stuff, I'd have a hard time not finding a way to get 2 of these guys. And you can make a case to play all 3 of them. I mean, legitimately, all 3 of these guys in the mid-range, I think we would say, we know Amari is inconsistent, but I think we'd say all 3 of these guys have the talent to be like 6,500, 6,800 wide receivers, and we're expecting them to get 8+ targets. You can make a case that you play all 3 of them and just take 3 underpriced guys. So yeah, I mean, I'd have a hard time going down. Deshaun Jackson, I think, is 4,900. So for large field tournaments, just a guy who can hit a big play. I think Christian Kirk is 4,700. Same thing, just a guy who could, hit a big play against an Oakland team that's probably not going to push Arizona to be too aggressive. But I'm not seeing anything to actually like down there.
I have to mention it. I don't think he's a good play, but I do have to mention him because he's my boy. Tre'Quan Smith saw 0 targets last week. That's how you know he won't be owned. However, I already mentioned how I thought that Drew Brees would be more voluminous this week, and Tre'Quan going up against the journeyman, the undrafted free agents in the Eagles secondary. I can't project Tre'Quan for more than 3 to 5 targets, but he's my boy. I had to mention him.
Get out of town.
Anything else? I mean, we didn't mention Antonio Brown. We didn't mention DJ Moore. We didn't mention Courtland Sutton, who we mention every week on this show. Anything else at wide receiver?
DJ Moore, yeah. I like that you brought him up. He's not actually on my list, but I noticed him when building. If you are going to go down there in large field tourneys and say who could actually get me 20+ points, I think he's interesting. Sterling Shepard, I think, is interesting this week, and I think his ownership will probably be pretty low because these other 3 5K receivers are so clearly better. Alshon Jeffrey, his last 200-yard games, one was this year, and the last one was in September of 2016. But the touchdown upside is there. There's a case to be made that he was still recovering from what was a torn ACL last year. Maybe that's why he had no 100-yard games. And then Antonio Brown, we won't dig into it, but you can look at the stat lines that he put up against the Jags last year and just recognize sometimes in these tough matchups, Roethlisberger just locks on to Antonio Brown. So he's in the tournament conversation for sure. I'll have at least a couple large field builds with him. And yeah, Mike Evans is another one. Same as some of these other guys, not as high of a projection, but if you're saying when to take guys that you don't really love, it's when they could post a week-winning score. And Mike Evans very clearly could do that this week.
Yeah, I like Buck stacks as contrarian stacks. Okay, let's move to tight end. Zach Ertz, and I introduced on the Edge podcast this week something called the Bible narrative. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but it's a close cousin of the shower narrative. Zach Ertz and Carson Wentz are both very religious. They both go to Bible study together. They pray together, and I don't think it's a coincidence that Zach Ertz is getting like 14 catches in games. Can we find the money to pay up 6,600 for Zach Ertz?
I imagine like 40% of each NFL team goes to Bible study together. Let's get real. Zach Ertz, yeah, I mean, he's not a good play because he goes to Bible study with Carson Wentz. He's a good play. It's hard for me to figure out how to process matchup with a guy like Ertz. Like the Saints have been a top 5 tight end defense back-to-back years. It's like this thing with teams not running against the Eagles and the Eagles allowing 4.7 yards a carry this year, but it's the second consecutive year they've allowed the fewest rushing attempts in the NFL. And there's a reason for that. Something coaches are seeing on film, something quarterbacks see at the line of scrimmage, that they're just avoiding the run against the Eagles. So that the matchup does scare me a little bit. I'm a volume guy, and so I look at, to me, the fact that we're losing 5 minutes off of time of possession in this game matters to me. The fact that the Eagles do have a really good red zone defense, have not allowed a lot of high scores. I see this more as like a 30-27 game or 30-24 game than like a 35-31. So, yeah, I mean, I think that I'm putting Ertz at around 9 or 10 targets in a tough matchup. I don't think he gets up to like the 15-16. With that said, I mean, what else is there to like at tight end? So I think you can make a case. It's something if you get up to him, you're now not taking one of these high-priced running backs or not taking one of these mid-priced wide receivers. So that makes it tough in an optimal build. But, yeah, I mean, clearly the best play, I don't know that it's worth it to find the salary to pay up. And I could be totally wrong on that.
Yeah. I think as in most weeks, I believe the optimal build is often going as cheap as you can. At tight end, last week I played Vernon Davis and took an air ball and still had a big week. Yeah, why are you excited about that?
That was my main team until I realized. So I had this thought last week with how much uncertainty there was on last week's slate. Rather than spreading uncertainty across 3 or 4 spots and taking like all these mid-range guys, pile all the uncertainty on a one guy. Mm-hmm. Hope that Vernon Davis hits, and even if he doesn't, you're in good shape. And I had several rosters that finished top 10% in tourneys with 0 from Vernon Davis. My main build was going to be on that until I was like, man, I can find a way to get up to Jimmy Graham. And I did find a way by taking Mike Evans instead of Julio and going down to defense. And, Jimmy Graham got 1 point. And that's the thing this week, right? So that's what I'm looking at. And I don't know. I thought that you would hate this, but maybe you won't. I'll call him the O'Shaughnessy at 2,600. And it's like, am I going to move around salary to get up to Austin Hooper, who could get double-digit targets but could get 3 or 4 targets? Like, he could be Jimmy Graham again. Or do I just say O'Shaughnessy's he's not going to fall shy of 5 points. He's going to get you 5 to 10 points. Maybe you get lucky and he gets you more. And then you can afford everything else that you want. So unless Hooper goes for 20 again, like if Hooper gets 12, if Ingram gets 11, if Vance gets 13, and O'Shaughnessy gets 8 at 2,600, I mean, you can do so much more with your roster. So that's how I'm seeing tight end right now, is like Zach Ertz, or go all the way down. You got Vernon Davis down there. You got Ricky Seals-Jones. You got O'Shaughnessy.
Yeah, I've actually heard a lot of people say this. I'm surprised that everybody is on O'Shaughnessy over Ricky Seals-Jones. And maybe I just haven't looked at O'Shaughnessy enough, because quite frankly, I haven't looked at him at all. But Ricky Seals-Jones ran a route on every single one of Josh Rosen's dropbacks last week. And I think Byron Leftwich is like, hey, Ricky Seals-Jones can be this guy that we all thought he would be in the preseason. And yeah, they were trailing a ton against the Chiefs, and maybe that's why his target count was so high. Ricky Seals-Jones on the season yards per route run is atrocious. I mean, it's worse than Jordan Reed. And by the way, Jordan Reed is only 3,800. But if you're interested in Jordan Reed, by the way, I tweeted an article today about what might be wrong with him from John Keim. But anyways, I'm surprised that everybody, or not everybody, but it seems like a lot of people are on O'Shaughnessy over RSJ. How do you compare those two guys?
Well, thank God. At least if I take a 0 from O'Shaughnessy, I won't be the only one. Yeah, I mean, I think basically just Ricky Seals-Jones hasn't been effective, and Josh, I mean, this offense has scored more than 18 points once all season, and They're averaging 236 yards per game. I tried to go back through recent years to see when was the last time a team averaged so few yards per game. I got back to 2013 and my internet was like, stop. And it stopped like reloading the pages because it's just like, you're wasting time. It's bad. 236 yards per game is bad. Obviously, tremendous matchup. But I don't think that Rosen's throwing 40 times here. I don't think that Oakland pushes them. So, I mean, I think it's close. I think Ricky Seals-Jones is definitely like in that conversation. I think that Vernon Davis is in the conversation again as well. I mean, only one target last week, but they controlled that game. That may not be the case this week. And, you know, I'm sure we both saw it. Vernon Davis, you know, if Alex Smith makes a good throw, he's got a 59-yard touchdown, and that play looks totally different. He's the only guy really getting upside looks in this offense. So, you know, he can get you 12 to 15. But, yeah, I mean, I just think O'Shaughnessy feels a lot safer than RSJ just because he is going to get these 4, 5, 6 targets. You know, maybe there's just 30 yards, but that's pretty valuable at this price. It's like the Hireman thing a couple of weeks ago. You know, if you can get these targets, enough targets pile up at this price, it's worth it. And here we are only talking about, you know, guys below 3K at tight end.
Well, I think, and I think a lot of people are going to go this route, or, you know, some people at least. And I think that leaves a lot of space in tournaments to pay up at tight end. Even if you don't get to Ertz, at least Hooper has the ability to get you 20 points. Like, I don't think anybody's going to sit here and say O'Shaughnessy or RSJ even has a chance at 20 points. So if you get to Austin Hooper, if you get to OJ Howard, if you get to Greg Olsen, and I personally like Vance McDonald a lot. Vance McDonald 16 targets the last time these two teams met up. If you get to these guys, at least you have a path to 20 points. So I think it's for sure worth considering this 4K range. And even in cash, like I hate leaving myself with guys who I think like, oh boy, this guy, if he gets 6 points, I'm like, this is Yahtzee. You know what I mean? Like, that can't be right. So maybe it's the optimal build, but we'll see. Does anybody stick out to you in the 4 to 5K range? And I'll include Jared Cook and Jordan Reed in there, 3,800 plus.
Yeah, I think that every tight end up there you mentioned is viable. I think Vance's 16 targets obviously come with the disclaimer that the Jags had a huge lead and the Steelers were chasing, but it would make sense for him to see another 6 to 8 targets. We know what he can do with the ball in his hands. Evan Ingram, I think, is a guy who's going to, you know, even if this whole range goes overlooked, he's going to go the most overlooked out of these guys. And, you know, we do know that he has upside. It's not impossible for him to go for 15 to 20. So, yeah, I think there's a case to be made for any of these guys. And obviously, if you want to go off the board, a guy that nobody's taking and has a ton of upside is OJ Howard is also in the conversation. And I would have liked him more if Godwin was going to miss. It looks like Godwin will play because they kind of run the same routes and take the same responsibilities in the offense. But, yeah, OJ Howard's part of it too. I do think right now I'm thinking the optimal build is to pay down just because there is so much uncertainty up there, and getting up to these higher priced plays is important. But I think that in tournaments where you can just say, let me take more upside, then it makes sense to go to these other guys.
I want to get your take on Jared Cook, because a lot of times when we have a lot of guys missing, like Jordy Nelson, like Martavis Bryant, I mean, you're starting Brandon LaFell and Seth Roberts. You would think that the number one target for Derek Carr should be Jared Cook. He's only 3,900. You know, if we think the Raiders can do anything at all, I would think that Jared Cook would be involved. But I don't know.
You know what my second or third best ball team is right now was a team where I drafted Travis Kelce, Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, Kareem Hunt, and Sammy Watkins, because good offenses put up points. And you had to, like, Sammy Watkins was going in like the 5th round. You had to overpay for him. And Tyreek Hill was going in the 3rd round. You had to overpay for him. But it was like, let me try this and then mix and match them with other, like, good offenses put up points. And that's something to think about in DFS, right? I mean, so yeah, Jared Cook, the thing that would scare me is Oakland has 2 games of 3 points, I think, in their last 3. Arizona's a good defense. So it's not going to be crazy for nobody on this team to top 7 or 8 points. I think Doug Martin actually probably gets 12 to 13 points here. And then, you know, Jalen Richard maybe gets 8 or 9, and maybe nobody else does anything. But yeah, I think Cook's in the conversation. I don't think he's a better play than these other guys. Won't be shocking if he pops off, but I think it's like, I think you're taking a bigger risk than just, oh, there's nobody else there. Let's play him.
One guy we didn't mention was Greg Olson, who looks really healthy. Did have 10 days off. I think he's overpriced at 5K, but certainly one of Cam's favorite targets. And if Darius Slay shuts down Devin Funchess, perhaps Greg Olson gets some more.
Yeah, I like that. I didn't even know his price until you said it. So that shows probably how overlooked he will go. Yeah, I mean, I think people are just going to focus on Hooper and below at tight end. That was one reason I liked OJ Howard. I think he's 4,900. And yeah, that's a sharp call.
All right, let's move to defense. I think my favorite raw play is the Cardinals at 3,100, but I always prefer to spend less. Did any defense stick out to you as head and shoulders above the rest this week?
No, and I think it's you can make a case for the Ravens, who have not been forcing turnovers this year, which is, I mean, that's a skill. Teams that are aggressive and go after the ball. You see the Seahawks, for example, year in and year out, force a lot of turnovers. Washington does force a lot of turnovers. They're 2,700, playing Deshaun Watson, who does take sacks and throws the occasional interception. The Chargers are in a good spot at home against Denver. The Cardinals, I think, for whatever reason, they're the team that when you look at defense, they kind of just catch your eye first. So I do think in my, lack of ability to project ownership, I would think that the Cardinals would be the highest owned. And I don't think they necessarily stand out above these other teams. So there's a case to be made for differentiating a defense and taking something different that has the same upside. But no, nothing stands out, and I couldn't find anything below Washington that I would actually feel comfortable playing. And I might be a little gun shy this week too, because last week it was like, when I was trying to get up to Jimmy Graham, it was like, all right, well, what if I sacrifice the Chiefs and Packers that I was on before and take a shot on I took the Falcons because the Browns turned the ball over and whatever else. And is like, you get 1 point instead of 10 to 14. So yeah, I mean, I probably will be too gun shy this week to go below the Redskins, but do you see anybody down there that you like?
I think we can project extremely pass-heavy game plans out of the Bucks and the Eagles. And although the Saints and the Giants certainly don't have the defenses that would scare anybody, when you get a ton of pass attempts, like Ryan Fitzpatrick dropping back 45 times, it's just like asking for fantasy points from the defense. You know what I mean? Like they're just asking for it. So I think the Giants are actually okay at 2,400, and the Saints at 2,100. As I mentioned, the Eagles are going down there with struggling offensive line play. Wouldn't shock me at all for the Saints to kind of overwhelm them. Maybe that only happens like 10% of the time or something, but Saints defense at 2,100. I mean, I expect Carson Wentz to drop back 40 plus times also. And, anytime you get a quarterback dropping back that much, there's just so many opportunities for big plays rather than these other teams who run the ball and, quarterbacks play cowardly and stuff. What do you think about those?
Yeah, I looked at both of those. What do the Giants have 10 sacks on the year? So that scares me a little bit. Yeah. Saints are an aggressive defense, so that would be one that I would be likelier to go on. Yeah, I mean, nothing really stands out this week of defense. It's a function of so many offenses to like. But, one thing that we always chase, right, is we're not worried as much about limiting points. Realistically, the Raiders could finish below 13 points, which is, or below 14 points, which is 4 defense special teams points to start out with, plus the 2 or 3 sacks you should get. Harder to get turnovers when they have the lowest average intended air yards in the NFL, least aggressive team in the NFL. But I do think there's a chance that you start out with a higher floor there, just because Oakland's the one team that you could be like, yeah, they might not even top 13 points.
Only other one that I was thinking about, I mean, Lamar Jackson starting is going to be so shaky. The Bengals defense, the Bengals do have talent. Even though they're on pace to be like the worst defense in NFL history, there are good players on Cincinnati's defense. Would you have any interest in that?
Wouldn't that be so sick if the Bengals put up like 25? Marvin Lewis takes over the defense and they just go ham.
Yeah.
Bengal, I don't like. This is a long time trend that we've talked about, like bend but don't break defenses. Patriots, Bengals, teams that don't typically rush more than 4 guys, don't try to make things happen. I don't like taking them, but yeah, like you said, Bengals do have talent. They have a strong front 4. could be playing a raw rookie quarterback. So that's interesting. Well, I don't like anything, so why not, right?
Yeah. All right. Let's move to everybody's favorite portion of the program. It is, of course, the stacks. This is where JM gives you the answers that win you $1 million. There's no reason to watch any other part of the show. There's no reason to read his 14.4 million word column. You just fast forward to here and you print the money. Go ahead, JM. We'll do one contrarian stack and we'll do one chalk stack. Go ahead.
All right. Tell me if this is contrarian or chalk. I'll call this one chalk. I got another one for contrarian. Eli Manning to Odell Beckham. I don't know how chalky it'll be, but I think it's, it'll be somewhat popular, right? And I think it's a really strong play. I think there's a shot that you get 60 points out of this. I mean, there's a shot that OBJ goes for 35. There's a shot that Eli goes for 25. Obviously, to be clear, we're talking about the Giants, one of the worst offenses in football. We're talking about Eli Manning, who has been, to borrow a term from Adam, a stone disaster this year. But floor is low, but the ceiling is really high in this spot.
All right. For my contrarian stack, I'm going to stick in that same game. I'm going to go Ryan Fitzpatrick to Deshaun Jackson. And I think that if we say that Mike Evans is extremely overrated, which I think is kind of proving to be the case, and if we think that Chris Godwin's ankle injury is perhaps something, missed 2 practices this week, we should see extended snaps for Deshaun Jackson, who's been rotating. And I mean, Ryan Fitzpatrick over 400 yards in 4 games already this year. Like, we just don't see that. And if he would have thrown 1 or 2 touchdowns last week or 3, I mean, everybody would be all over themselves to play Ryan Fitzpatrick this week. Instead, they're a little bit gun shy. So I like those Buck stacks, and certainly would not hesitate to put Mike Evans or OJ Howard or whoever else in there as part of the stacks, and running it back with Odell or Saquon certainly makes sense as well. So I think that's all in play.
All right, my contrarian one, and I haven't crunched the numbers on this. I landed on this or found this on Thursday night and still need to work through it a little bit, but I do think it's interesting if you want to mess around with projections and numbers on it yourself. And that is taking, forget about the quarterback, but just taking Kenny Golladay, Kerryon Johnson, and Theo Riddick all on the same roster together. And if you're going to say, I don't think Luke Wilson's a good play, I don't think TJ Jones is a good play, and look, an offense is still going to put up 300, 350 yards, there's a chance that these guys get you 70, 80% of those yards, that these guys combine for 15 to 20 catches, that these guys combine for 2 to 3 touchdowns. They're all pretty cheap. So realistically, you could get like 15 from Riddick, 22 or 23 from Golladay, 22 or 23 from Kerryon, and you can end up with 60 points from these 3 guys at a pretty cheap price. So I think that's worth considering this week in cash games. Crunch the numbers yourself, see what you think. But if you don't like TJ Jones, you don't like Luke Wilson, you're essentially saying, I think everything's going through these 3 guys. Something to think about there.
All right, for my chalk stack, I will go with the layup. It is, of course, Drew Brees to Michael Thomas. I mean, when you watch Drew Brees play, he's just like Michael Thomas. He has so much confidence that Michael Thomas is going to make these ridiculous catches. It's like almost an extension of the run game. Like, that's like, there's like no chance of an incompletion or interception. It's like, I'm throwing it to Michael Thomas. He's going to catch it. At worst, we're going to get like 7 or 8 yards, and he can just keep doing that over and over again against this overmatched Eagles secondary. I know that Michael Thomas doesn't have the same type of target or ADOT ceiling as some of the other guys in this range, but I do think that we've seen him get up earlier in the year in shootouts to 15, 16 targets. So yeah, I think Michael Thomas and Drew Brees is just an absolute layup. Would shock me if either of those guys failed. All right, any 1 week season news to tell the people? Who are we talking to right now? Are we talking to subscribers only, or are we talking to the freeloading scumbags out there?
We're talking to everybody. We're talking to people building up their bankroll and trying to get to that $50 threshold so they can get a 1 week season subscription and to current subscribers. Good cop, bad cop. All right. Yeah, we're talking to everybody. Guys, site's great. Check it out. There's always some free stuff on there every week. So click through that, see if it's worth it. You know what I need to do is make the old NFL Edge articles just free so that you can look at it and see if you think it's worth it for you. But yeah, we got to get off because I'm getting angry texts from Silva because I didn't pick up his phone calls, and he's calling me right now. So apparently work doesn't matter. talking about DFS on the phone is the only thing that matters.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, JM has put his heart, his soul, the CBD oil is dripping out of his hair and into this article every week. So make sure that you actually buy it. Don't be a freeloader. All right. For Jerry, for JM, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.